Okay, let's move now to the our session. My name is Nazmi Al-Masri. I'm a professor of education and teacher training. Um, in this session, titled Inclusive Education in a Time of War and Displacement, Challenges and Resilience in Gaza, we try to share some institutional experiences related to education, and this institution tried to provide inclusive education, especially for persons with disability who are especially vulnerable in context of severe conditions like the ones we go through in Gaza, including a prolonged wartime and bombardment, um, including also sudden forced frequent displacement or evacuations, tent encampment, harsh weather conditions, cold in winter, hot in summer, difficult humanitarian conditions, absence of essential survival needs, such as food, water, medicine, and hygiene supplies for persons with disabilities, especially, absence of peace of mind, heart, and soul, and absence of any facilities to support the educational process at the preschool, school level, and university level. Yet, some institutions tried their best to mitigate, and they have been trying their best to mitigate such challenges as much as they can, which has become a must and an ethical obligation and a humanitarian obligation, as some institutions have been working to overcome or to reduce the impact of such challenges. Today, we have three institutions to share their experiences related to providing inclusive education. The first speaker and representing the first institution is Mr. Naim Kabaja, who is a disability inclusion consultant at Atfaluna Society for Deaf Children in Gaza. And his presentation is entitled Self-Learning During Crisis, Model of Atfaluna Society for Deaf Children. I'd like to invite you, Mr. Naim, to deliver your presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Nazmi. I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to take part in this August conference. Allow me at the onset to thank the organizers, as I said, for inviting me to speak from Gaza, which is under a constant siege. And my colleagues, Dr. Layla, Dr. Nazmi, and the film that was screened, it shed light on situation in Gaza. I will not talk at length about that issue, but at the onset, in the beginning, if I may, I would like to tell the translators with regards to regarding using the term of people with disability, PWD, in Arabic. And to use people with disability term, children with disability term, according to the UN Convention. So it was just a note for the translators and interpreters. The issue I would like to talk about now is about inclusive self-learning and the Atfaluna Society for Deaf Children in Gaza model. First, I would like to introduce you to Atfaluna organization. Atfaluna organization is a charity organization established in 1992 in Gaza. It provides inclusive services for persons with disabilities in Gaza, PWDs, of course, and society organizations provide services to 10,000s of individuals in Gaza. During the war, Atfaluna organization provided emergency services, be it services related to providing food, water, or basic consumption stuff, for example, hygiene kit for women, protection for women and children, and continued providing education and providing services during the war, and providing, of course, preserving assistive devices to people with disabilities. And we're trying to adapt with the reality that we are living in Gaza through the emergency plan that the organization is implementing. Of course, today I will talk about the model of our organization, which was based on the events in Gaza and the necessity of adapting, of going in par with the changes, especially in the field of education, as a result of the context in Gaza. As you know, the Gaza Strip has been facing an atrocious war and a wide war, a genocide, as it has been described. And this has been going on for 14 months now. In this war, Gaza lost, according to the UN statistics, and according Gaza lost more than 94% of its schools. And this is why, and the rest of the school, the remaining 6% of schools that are still in Gaza have become shelters for refugees, for displaced in Gaza. This is why it is believed that these schools will remain as shelters for years to come, because Gaza has been destroyed, has been leveled, infrastructure has been destroyed. Nothing remains viable in Gaza today. Of course, there is a study that was undertaken by Atfaluna organization or Atfaluna society, which shows the study is entitled The Impact of Halted Education on the Conflict-Affected Children with and Without Disabilities. The study was undertaken in 2024. In July 2024, the study showed that more than 90% of parents of children with disabilities or without disabilities, they reported on urgent need for the children to return to school. Also, the study showed that 96% of parents of children with disabilities they expressed concern of their children's future because of suspension of education. The study also showed that 94% of parents said that there's a great a lot of facilities do not provide the needs of people with disabilities. This is why we launched this initiative based on this study. Next slide, please. So Atfaluna has taken the initiative to focus on inclusive self-learning. And the idea came because it goes in par with that we are living in Gaza. We have to have an alternative to formal education in students in government, formal education in public schools and government schools. So the initiative came from the fact that it is to motivate students through strategies to help them define objectives and to provide children with an internal motivation to have this inner desire to learn. Of course, we are talking about children, be it children with disabilities or without disabilities. And so the self-inclusive learning is important because it is better than traditional learning styles and methodologies that focus on lower mental abilities in a traditional manner, and which only focuses on remembering and knowledge. We want to have a transformation in education in Gaza. We want to apply through self-inclusive learning. We want to move to sophisticated mental learning to be able to discuss, communicate, critical thinking, innovative thinking and creative thinking as well. This is something that we would like to promote through self-inclusive learning, and also to work on analyzing and comparison. So self-inclusive learning as well focuses on the emotional side, mental side, and this is something that we need in the hard times that we are witnessing and living in Gaza. This is why Atfaluna model really promotes self-learning amongst children and also support these children on the mental level, psychological level, because we know that the children have been greatly affected by what's going on currently in Gaza. The strategies that Atfaluna is working on to develop inclusive self-learning. First, Atfaluna worked on community engagement. We focused a lot on engaging families, parents, societies, and communities. This is why Atfaluna held a number of meetings with stakeholders and those concerned and the families and the communities in order for them to support their children, to support their communities. And this is why there is intensive and continuous training on self-learning skills and strategies and how to implement them, be it in a tent, be it in shelters, be it in classrooms as well, or in other places of learning that were established by Atfaluna or other organizations so as to have effective learning despite all the hard situation we were witnessing and living in Gaza. We took into consideration that we want to build our plans based on data. We wanted to have data-driven decision-making. We gathered data on the needs in Gaza. Why do we want to have an alternative to traditional learning? How can this program be effective and efficient? Of course, we based on our findings on data, and then we based on intervention on data and information gathered in order to be able to teach children in a modern manner, in an adequate manner, because in the self-learning process, we really we summarize the time that the child needs in the classroom, because in the classroom, for example, because we provide them with the children with the methods and the tools, and the child himself will develop his skills and abilities. Access to resources. There was a lot of difficulty to access resources, but with simple resources, we were able to establish centers for inclusive self-learning in the different regions, be it in the north of Gaza, south of Gaza. We established centers, and we have thousands of students who have enrolled in our program. Of course, we wanted this program or this approach be a right-based approach, because according to the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability and also Human Rights Declaration, there should be no, of course, discrimination in education process, and students with disabilities and without disabilities should learn in the same centers and in the same learning places, so as not to feel that they are discriminated and not to leave anyone behind. Another important part is that in preparing for this program is to train the teacher on how to implement inclusive self-learning strategies. And as I've mentioned before, we have organized a series of workshops, training workshops for hundreds of teachers on how to implement modern learning strategies and how to motivate students and not to use traditional means of teaching. We focused on learning through play, interaction, activities, and we focused on training teachers on modern teaching methods, for example, how to take field trips, organize field trips, and have to have a practical implementation of the different programs, adapting curricula Also, it was very important for us not to use government curricula because there's difficulty in implementing them in the situation in Gaza. And we wanted to focus to have certain basic, let's say, courses related to learning, whereby students are able, let's say, to go in par with the change, to adapt with the change, and they can follow up themselves the learning process. And this is why we focused mainly on main, let's say, subjects, be it mathematics or sciences, and Arabic language as well. And this is why it was quite important for us to motivate children to learn, to love these subjects, so as they themselves seek to learn and not to impose learning on children, but we want the child to have this desire to learn.
جمعية أطفالنا في نشاطاتها
When it comes to inclusivity,
كانت طبعا قدمت
our organization had previously laid the ground for its inclusive self-learning model. It started by establishing an inclusive framework to guide us all in inclusive tasks. At the same time, we have established our own training program. It's a continuous training program with its own independent staff for the promotion of inclusive self-learning strategies. And we started collaborating with the education cluster in Syria and in other places to provide educational content, and we've established a specific vision in order to promote this kind of inclusive self-learning strategies all over the Gaza Strip. We have also created a new guide that details and clarifies how inclusive self-learning strategies are to be enforced, how will they be implemented for children and people in general, with or without disabilities, in an interactive fashion, in a way that is accessible, agile, allowing these people with disabilities to implement all concepts that have been included in that guide. Next slide, please.
Next, please.
Of course, our association values a number of principles related to inclusive approach to inclusive education, and we've worked on enforcing these principles by creating an enabling and welcoming environment for children. So, in spite of the difficult circumstances, we wanted to make sure that children have as safe as possible of an environment away from continuous bombardment, and to use even the simplest tools that help them in their daily lives, and ensure that the entire education process is more agile and accessible. That way, children, when they come to our center, they would feel welcomed and they would be quite happy that they have come to all of our sessions, and they would have the necessary motivation to concentrate in class. For instance, in one of our surveys that we've conducted with our implementing partners, because we have about 7 participating institutions in the implementation of this inclusive self-learning program. So through this survey, we detected a significant improvement in beneficiaries' feelings and perception of diversity, and they started feeling at ease, and that there is no difference between them and other children. And we're very happy to see how children with disability started approaching children without disability and created great relations of friendship. And in brief, this is what I wanted to say about our association in the limited amount of time, to give you a general idea about what we're attempting to implement in the Gaza Strip. Again, I have to iterate that all of this happened in spite of all the difficulties and all the problems that we have been facing Gaza, and we still continued in that path to provide quality, inclusive education to everyone, and to offer a glimmer or a glimpse of hope to children, to ensure that education is a continuous process, because if education stops, life stops. Thank you for your attention.
وشكرا لاستماعكم.
Thank you very much, Mr. Naim Kabaja, for this very insightful and I would say also visionary presentation for the future of Palestinian children, including children with disability. And if there is any question, we will have time for further information to be given by Mr. Naim Kabaja. If anybody has the time, and they can ask also on the Q&A, and we will have time to answer all the questions for further information. Thank you very much. And now let me move to my second colleague from Gaza, Mr. Loai Abu Saif, who is working as Disability Program Lead at the Medical Aid for Palestinians, MAP, UK, but in the office of Gaza. And his title of presentation is Disability Inclusive Education in Gaza Emergency Context, Identifying Challenges and Proposing Solutions. Let me, Mr. Loai, just inform the audience about the third colleague who was supposed to also to present, Dr. Nesma Al-Ghoula, but she couldn't join us today. She is the coordinator of the Disability Center at the Islamic University of Gaza. She coordinates education, higher education to university students in Gaza. And she was supposed to talk about disability services and inclusion challenges and activities during the war that face Palestinian university students. And just briefly, let me just 3 points she was supposed to say. And according to the abstract, she was supposed to talk about the significant challenges faced by 180 students enrolled at the Islamic University of Gaza. They represent about 20 or to 25% of all university students, disabled students at universities in Gaza. She was also expected to talk about important risks arising from these challenges, including feelings of marginalization and social exclusion, concerns about the future economic instability, loss of self-reliance and self-dependence, increased feeling of frustration and lack of confidence. And then she was supposed to talk about activities that the Islamic University and measures that the Islamic University of Gaza have taken to facilitate the process of learning and make it accessible to disabled students, especially mobility, students with mobility disability and vision disability. Unfortunately, she was moving during this week. She's moving from, she was displaced with her family. She's blind. Her sister is blind. Her mother is elderly with different health problems. She has to move several times, but she apologized for not being able to participate today with us because she's now, it's like another displacement stage where she moved to her destroyed home and she couldn't connect with us today due to lack of electricity, internet, and basic facilities to her. I would like to convey my sincere thanks to my colleague, Dr. Nesma Al-Ghoula, for her interest in joining us, but we also understand and appreciate what she's going through. Thank you, Nesma, wherever you are now and whatever you are doing. Now, let me move to my colleague. I'm really proud to have also my colleague, Mr. Loai Abu Saif
Thank
from
you so much.
CAP. The floor is yours, Mr. Loai.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nazmi. And actually, our Nesma, our colleague Nesma, it's reflect the challenges actually that people and persons with disabilities have facing in Gaza Strip and considered as a living example of the people with disabilities who cannot reach at the least for the basic services and challenges and accessibility to basic needs, including water, including food, including electricity and internet access. And this also worth mentioning because if you are talking about education and the challenges that we are facing for education, it's worth mentioning that internet access in such circumstances it's inaccessible for all. Thank you so much for everyone, for all those in charge for this project. And I would like actually to start my remarks by expressing my pride in being as a participant in this significant conference, which is being highlighting the issues of disability in the difficult circumstances we are living in. Um, Let me to share my presentation. I don't know if it's being shared now. Seen?
About, not yet. In a minute, we'll be able to double it. Okay, now we can see.
So let use this minute to focus on Gaza context, where Gaza, where I reside, and Mr. Nazmi and Mr. Naim and Nesma, where residing, is a living example of the challenges faced by people with disabilities. Under siege, many suffers from a severe lack of basic needs, including food, water, healthcare, shelters, and education. Unfortunately, these challenges are compounded by restrictions of movement and making access to essential assistance nearly impossible. Persons with disabilities in Gaza are integral part of the fabric of society and have legitimate rights to live with dignity and receive the necessary support to realize their potential. So we need solidarity of internal community, our international community, to support our efforts in improving their living conditions. Thank you all for being here today, and I look forward to fruitful discussions that could contribute to improving the conditions of people with disabilities in Gaza Strip and around the world. So let's us use this conference as a platform to raise the awareness, build the bridges of cooperations, and achieve positive change. And here I want to just remember all of the martyrs whom we lost in this genocide of people with disabilities. Many of our friends and many of activists of the disability movement in Gaza, we have lost them in this genocide. Thank you all, and let's start my presentation about my study, which is titled Disability Inclusive Education in Gaza Emergency Context, Identifying Challenges and Proposing Solutions. This presentation, dear, explores the challenges of providing a quality education to students with disabilities, specifically the children with disabilities, particularly in the context of ongoing conflict and a humanitarian crisis. In its introduction, we want to say that in Gaza Strip, since October 2023, the education system has been totally halted. This war has caused severe damages to educational infrastructure in Gaza Strip, where a complete scholastic years were almost lost. In this presentation, dears, we will explore the current state of disability inclusive education in Gaza Strip, highlighting the below 5 points. Where firstly we will talk about the context analysis of Gaza Strip, then we will go to study methodology, then the limitation of the study, and number 4 we are going to review the result of the study, including demographic data, challenges, opportunities, and solutions. And finally, we will share with you the recommendations of this study. In the term of Gaza context analysis, it's worth mentioning and highlighting that in terms of humanitarian crisis, that the ongoing conflict in Gaza has led to devastating impact on the civilian population by default. Approximately 83% of persons with disabilities in the Gaza Strip have lost their assistive devices during displacement, and you can imagine how will be the life of people with disabilities without assistive devices under attacks, under airstrike, under recurrent evacuation orders, and etc. While in terms of children affected, as we know that the statistics show that at the least 45,059 Palestinians were killed in this genocide, including at the least 13,000 of children. So we have lost 13,000 children within just 14 months of this genocide. While regarding disability rates, it's worth sharing that 2023 estimates show that 89,000 children in Gaza are with disabilities. This is based on the wide definition of disability, by the way. So we have 98,000 of people with disabilities, most of them with learning difficulties. And within this presentation, there is a segregation about the age. I need also to highlight that the use of explosive weapons in Gaza in 2024 genocide condemned an average of 475 children each month, or 15 children per day, to potentially lifelong disabilities, including severely injured limbs and hearing disabilities. So daily basis, we have 15 children a day with some kind of disabilities, including physical disabilities, hearing disabilities, and visual disabilities. In terms of education distributed, as mentioned by Mr. Naim, almost we have 658,000 children have been denied access to education for 2 years. As well as for infrastructure damages, it's worth mentioning that nearly 95% of basic, secondary, and post-secondary, including university education, have been damaged or destroyed. Finally, in this context analysis, we have to highlight also some statistic related to MHPSS, where nearly 1.2 million children are in need of mental health psychosocial support for depression, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts. Next slide, this highlight the research methodology, where for this research, we have developed a cross-sectional survey which designed to collect quantitative and qualitative data on disability inclusive education services for internally displaced students with disabilities. For the sampling, or regarding the sampling, we have 31 participants, include educators, administrators, NGOs, workers, and stakeholders involved in providing inclusive education to persons with disabilities. While regarding the data collection instrument, as we have mentioned, that we have developed a structured online questionnaire to collect the data on various aspects of disability inclusive education. The questionnaire mainly include sections related to demographic information, challenges faced in implementing inclusive education, type of disabilities or student with disabilities targeted in this educational facilities, as well as we have included some part or sections to highlight the proposed solutions and opportunities for implementing and promoting disability inclusive education. Finally, regarding the data analysis, quantitative data were analyzed using descriptive statistic to summarize these or the responses of participants. Also, frequencies and the percentage were calculated for each question. In this section or in this slide, I wanted to share with you some limitation of the study. The first point, which is related to politically and security instability, where the study limited sample size, which is 31, reflect the challenges of conducting research in conflict zone and in such circumstances with unstable internet access and organization focusing on immediate, including moving the people from south to the north, from for providing them with some transportation, because actually this study and this survey was conducted during the first days of ceasefires and starting the returning of displaced people from the south to the north. The second type of limitations is related to resources constraints, where limited funding, personal and logistic support pose significant challenges to conducting comprehensive research in such conflict zone. The third limitation type is related to time constraint also. Time constraint associated with presentation deadlines added some complexities of conducting and presenting research in emergency context. Finally, the study sample size, 31 participants, may not be responsive, and this due to, as we have mentioned, collecting responses face difficulties to unstable internet access. Not all of the actors or the participant or the relevant population have access to internet, as we have mentioned. Organization also being occupied with the internally displaced people interventions and highlighting challenges of research in emergency context. Next slide. We are here. We are talking about the results of the surveys, and the first slide, it's a demographic snapshot. This snapshot highlight the main results of the sections where in answering the question of the position or the role of this participant, 45% of them were educators and academic, 26% of them they were administrator, and 90% of them they were NGO workers. And here we mean the non-governmental organizations, including both international and local NGOs workers. Regarding the education sector, most of the participants, they were 55% of them they were school education, while 29% of them they were participant from higher education facilities, while 16% were from preschool education. The place of providing education, it was one of the demographic questions we have focused on the survey, where the statistics show that 45% of the education services were provided and attended, while 32% of these services were provided in a building, while it's partially damaged or with low resources of education resources, while 23% of these facilities providing services of education online. Regarding the gender, we have 65% of the participants were female and 35% of them they were male. In the section of commitment to inclusion, we have asked many questions, and here we highlight the highest percentage of answers. So regarding the continuity of the services, 74 of the institutions are still providing educational services for IDPs with disabilities, especially in 2024, or the last months of 2024. Regarding the diverse needs and the type of disabilities, students with range of disabilities are being served, including some statistic and some percentage here, including and showing that the highest percentage is regarding to people with or students with physical disabilities, which represent 55% of these people who have been targeted in the educational or inclusive education, plus 32% of them they were visual disabilities, 45% of them they were people with hearing disabilities, speech and language difficulties and disorders considered 26%, while intellectual disabilities were 32%, and learning difficulties 26%, while the lowest percentage was related to autism spectrum disorder. Psychosocial support. It's also have been يعني, uh, one of the questions in this survey, where the psychosocial support is a key service provided, highlighting the recognition of emotional and psychosocial needs of the student with disabilities. One of the questions also it was about the type of education services provided for persons with disabilities, and here we have some information where 74% of the participants highlight that they providing in-person teaching in classrooms, where also 65% of them they provided psychosocial support services. 45% of them they are providing educational services for visual or people with visual disabilities, and 36% of them they providing early interventions for people and students with disabilities, and 26% they are providing online learning. While regarding the answer of the current accessibility of education facilities, 10% of the participants just mentioned that their educational facilities are accessible, while mostly 35% of them somehow it was accessible, and mostly they indicate that the facilities of education it's inaccessible for people with uh, physical disabilities and people with visual disabilities as well as hearing disabilities. In our survey, we have also a part or a section regarding the assistive devices and assistive technology needs. And the first one, it was about the available technologies and devices, where 65% they show that people with hearing disabilities and 45% with mobility aids, including wheelchair, crutches, as well as some kind of walker and this kind of mobility aids, while communication devices and communication assistant tools, it's 30%, 32%, while speech-to-text software, it's 26% of these available technologies and devices. The second section in assistive technology needs, it shows that how much we are suffering from the shortage of assistive devices, where 74% of the student targeted in educational services need for mobility aids, and 65% of them need to services or adaptation for the educational curriculum for text-to-speech and speech-to-text softwares, as well as some people need hearing assisted devices. They need screen readers and magnifiers for people with visual disabilities, and etc. If we move to one of the main sections in this survey, which related to challenges to inclusive education, where we have mentioned around 9 main challenges in this survey, and this paragraph, this graph show that 74% of the participants have voted that political instability it's the main challenge to inclusive education, while 81% of the participants show that in the educate infrastructure is the first challenge for inclusive education. 65% of the participants voted for the security threats and for insufficient specialized teacher training considered as the main challenges for inclusive education. 55% of the participants have shown that the limited access to learning resources, which is considered as education, while 45% of them say that the lack of psychosocial support is one of the main challenges also, while 35 of them say that lack of experts of education or of teacher is considered as a challenge. 10% of the
Excuse me, Mr.
participants
Loai.
show or have mentioned.
Excuse me, Mr. Loai. Because
Yes.
of time limitation, and we want to leave time for questions and comments. Can you try to finish in 2 minutes, please? Or 3 minutes?
Yes.
Please, thank you.
Okay, just I need 3 minutes. Other challenges to inclusive education, it was mentioned that lack of awareness among education policymakers and decision makers. And some people have mentioned that one of the challenges is the negative impression toward the children with disabilities, and including the stigma, limited data and evidence on children with disabilities, and poor understanding of their specific needs considered as one of the challenges also. Finally, we have mentioned that all education facilities, both UNRWA and governmental, neither destroyed or become shelters. So these are the challenges for inclusive education. If we talk about the barriers observed in terms of community awareness toward disability inclusive education, the main statistics, it was like 65% show that lack of awareness in the local community and toward the rights of people with disabilities. Stigma is show that 55% of the barriers related to stigma, and as you saw that some statistic here regarding to the barriers. Proposed solutions, when we ask the people about what is the proposed solution, 81% of them, they suggest to focus on training the teacher and enhance their capacities in regarding inclusive methodologies. 74% of the participants have proposed accessible infrastructure, where they highlight the importance of building accessible school infrastructure is essential to promoting inclusive education. Some of them also highlight that there is a need for enhancing the fundraising efforts to provide inclusive education institutions with needed resources. And some proposed solutions related to advocacy and highlight the right of people with disabilities, community engagement, and building a partnership between NGOs and INGOs to support inclusive education. If we, and this slide talking about the existing opportunities in Gaza current context to promote the inclusive education, we have 4 points. The first one is it's the international collaboration and support. The second one, it's the digital learning tools and the platforms where we need to support inclusive education, community-based education and initiative, which is needed to build upon existing structure and the programs. The fourth point and the fourth opportunities, it's the capacity building for educators, where we need to focus on training teacher and inclusive education practices. Finally, we have mentioned that shifting societal perceptions, it's one of the most important opportunities, where we need to reduce the social stigma toward children with disabilities. Here we have highlights how the community organization and local governmental can collaborate to support inclusive education. So these are answers of some participants, where they highlight that there should be a joint policy development and advocacy. And the second rank, they have shared that there is a need for teacher training and capacity building, raising awareness, building accessible infrastructure, and partnership and resource mobilization. These some insights and suggestions. And finally, this is the most important part, which is the recommendation. So based on this study, we have summarized the recommendation of participants in 13 recommendation. The first one is related to develop an inclusive education framework, which is could considered as a clear national framework with supportive infrastructure to ensure access and participation for all students in their local schools, and especially during emergencies. The second recommendation, it was to allocate resources and budget for national NGOs or for all of the education facilities to focus on adapting their classrooms and services, education services for people with disabilities. The third recommendation was invest more in teacher and building their capacity. The fourth one, it was related to provide accommodation accessibility to ensure access to assistive devices, individual instructions, specialized equipment, and rehabilitation services. The fifth recommendation, it was for engaged families and community, and this is most important recommendation. So we need to build a partnership with families and local community, involve parents, students, to involve them in the decision making to meet their educational needs. The sixth recommendation was to promote inclusive consultations, so to keep people with disabilities, teacher with disabilities, student and their families involved and engaged in developing the strategies and address their unique needs during emergencies. The next recommendation was to support the student development, where we need to create a comprehensive system, as we have mentioned, and include individual educational plan, remedial classes, inclusive extracurricular activities to support academic and personal growth would mitigate their behavioral challenges. The next recommendation, it was to enhance e-learning accessibility, especially in this context and circumstances of unavailability of classrooms and adapted school or educational facilities. Now, also, we have some recommendation related to build accessible and inclusive infrastructure. We know that's one of the difficult recommendation, but it was what's worth mentioning. Ensure safe school return. So we need to develop and implement strategies to facilitate the safe return of children to school. So we need to address their urgent educational needs, their psychosocial needs, their the need of the rehabilitation of the people with the new disabilities, and etc. We need also to integrate disability inclusion in emergency plans, and we need to foster the multi-sectorial collaboration between all of the governmental, non-governmental, and international NGOs and disability-focused organizations to pool the resources and share expertise. Finally, it's worth mentioning that one of the recommendations was to support the community-based rehabilitation centers, which is what the most famous centers for people with disabilities in the Gaza Strip, were including 7 CBRC centers providing the educational services for students with disabilities in all of Gaza areas. So we need to strengthen the role of CBRCs, which have trusted the profile in offering tailored educational and rehabilitation services for children with disabilities across the 7 camps of the Gaza Strip. And this is the end. Thank you for your hearing, and thank you for this chance. The mic is you, Dr. Nazmi. If you have any question.
I'll step in for Nazmi. Maybe he's unable to connect just now. Oh, Nazmi.
Sorry.
I'll hand over to you.
Sorry, I was muted. And okay, thank you, Mr. Loai, very much for this meaningful and insightful research, especially the recommendations and suggestions. And no time to elaborate more. I give opportunity for the questions and the priority for a question. We have, I think, 5 questions here. One, the first question for both of you, for Mr. Loai and Mr. Naim. If you can join us, Mr. Naim, are you still with us?
Yes, Dr. Loai.
Great.
Yes.
Yes. So here the
Yes,
first
please.
question says, by Amin Inabi, after the war of Gaza, it's important to think about starting a study aimed at knowing the number of people with disabilities after the war, because there are different numbers here and there. I think this is very important question and the suggestion at the same time.
One of the recommendations, yeah.
And recommendation to establish a database on this. Any comments on this?
Yesterday or last Thursday, it was one of the main in our meeting ability working group and the rehabilitation sector inside the bingo, Mr. Nazmi and Mr. Amin, where we discussed this important issue related to the lack of evidence-based data for people with disabilities, specifically after 2023 genocide. So we don't have a data for the how many people we lost of disabilities, how many the injuries of people with disabilities, and we need actually to foster all the efforts to develop a database. This should if Miss Layla is still with us to have some efforts from the Ministry of Social Development and other relevant agencies and bodies to work on such initiative to have a database for people with disabilities in Gaza Strip.
Okay, if I may add quickly on this, I strongly support this suggestion. And there is an example done by Welfare Town Association for orphans. And they are planning to, they started in fact, a few months ago, collecting data about children who lost one or both parents for about 20,000 children. So if this could be used as a model, as an example for disabled children or disabled people, how they computerized everything in full collaboration also with the Social Development Ministry, because they have got also a system. As far as I know, they have a database, developed a database until the war, where about 100,000 something completed the online application form with documents. So it would be good to, as a priority, I think, yes, this is very important. Thank you, Amin, and thank you, Loai, for this. I don't know if Naim wants to say something. Yes.
In truth, this is quite important. Even before the war, we do not have enough data and information to be quite truthful. There is no accurate information about the numbers and classification of PWDs, persons with disabilities. This is why we are in dire need to use scientific and exact tools in order to have a comprehensive survey of disability in the Gaza Strip. And this requires a national effort and national action, and the National Palestinian Statistics Authority should be at the top of this and should be a part of the team, and should have support and funding for this activity. We are in dire need, truthfully, to have more specific and exact data and information. We cannot say in the Gaza Strip there is 6% or 6.5% of persons with disabilities, or 2.5%, or just give any figures. I think we need more exact figures. In the Gaza Strip, all of our life is filled with destruction, injuries, disabilities, and we talk about just these very unclear statistics. This is why we need a comprehensive, exact survey regarding disability before and after the war. This is
thank you. This is very important. And I would say again, this is, I hope MAP will be able to do this in full collaboration with other official institution and all the bodies and institutions in Gaza. I hope that
that's one of our
if you can
strategies,
lead this,
inshallah.
that will be great. That would be an excellent outcome of this conference.
Inshallah.
Okay, next question. We have 4 questions. Second question, and time is almost over. We have 2-3 minutes maybe. Is there in Gaza centers or charities for psychosocial, for psychological disorders such as ADHD or learning difficulties as dyslexia? I see the concerning on physical and sensory disabilities and sensory disabilities. Quickly, please, in half a minute, so we can answer all the questions. Each one in half a minute, if you have any comment or answer to this question. Yes, let's start with Naim this time.
To ask.
الإجابة طبعا إنه موجود
Yes,
في
there
بعض
are, of
المراكز
course, some centers for Down syndrome, ADHD, and others. But let me be frank, learning disabilities and learning difficulties actually is something, the concept interacts between, there's, let's say, an interaction between learning difficulties and learning disabilities. This is why we have some centers that focus on learning disabilities, but sometimes there's a mix-up between learning difficulties and learning disabilities that require high training, high resources, and of course, determining learning disabilities amongst individuals and children require experts, really international and highly skilled experts. This is why we have some services provided, but sometimes or most often the diagnosis is not accurate.
Right, let's move to the let's move to the third question because of time limit. The third question is, what an initiative with exclamation mark, Celine, I think. Could you maybe elaborate more on how these self-inclusive learning activities were done with the children with intellectual disabilities? This is again to Naim about your initiative about self-learning. Is there anything related to children with intellectual disabilities through the initiative, self-learning initiative, have been part of such initiative? Briefly, please.
Definitely. We do not discriminate amongst children. It is known worldwide that 20% of disabilities cannot, let's say, be fully inclusive because of their specificity in disabilities, but mental or minor mental disabilities, intellectual disabilities, these children are easily included amongst other children. And we at Atfaluna, we have a wide experience in Gaza in inclusive learning, and we cooperate widely with Islamic University. We have the ability and we have tools and we have working mechanisms in order to work with all categories of disabilities. Because of the time constraint, we cannot explain everything. I hope that the person who asked the question join us in the teacher training workshops to see how we teach them how to deal with children, whether children with disabilities or without disabilities.
Okay, and I agree that also anybody from the audience is free to contact any one of the presenters, Mr. Loai or Mr. Kabaja, through also their emails or contact information. Last question, and this very brief question. Could you please, could we know the number of children with disabilities reached in the inclusive self-learning initiative with all these challenges?
This is Naim, of course.
Yeah, I think yes, to Mr. Naim. The number of children who joined the training, the inclusive self-learning activities or initiative.
الأطفال اللي شاركوا طبعا احنا نموذج، يعني بصراحة ما ابنها نموذج بنحاول انه ننشره في قطاع غزة على مستوى أطفالنا وشركائها. استطعنا أن نصل إلى 1200 طالب تقريبا، منهم 250 من ذوي الإعاقة.
Thank you. One request coming just now and final, I will close the session. Can you send the study? This is for you, Mr. Loai. Can you send the study of Dr. Abu Saif about inclusive education? The floor is you. You conclude, Loai. The question is you. Can you send your study to Dr. Salam?
I can just share with me the email, Dr. Salam, and I will share it with you in both statistics and findings and the presentation also.
Thank you very much. Time is over. I'm sure we have a lot of things to discuss and a lot of things to share and a lot of things to raise. We are almost 5 minutes late. Thank you very much. And it's back to you, Professor Dina Kiwan. I'm sorry about 5 minutes late.
Thank you all for a really interesting and thought-provoking session. We will have a 10 minutes break now, and then we will return for a session starting at 11:30 on inequalities of knowledge production. See you in a few minutes.